This is the third and final part of the Star Wars Holiday Special Boba Fett build. Part 1, we tackled the helmet and Boba Fett's custom rifle. Part 2, we took a look at how to make a cheap and simple Mandalorian jetpack. And in this part, we're looking at everything else. So that's the bodysuit, the armor, the boots, the accessories. But just before I get started, I want to say if you want to find out stuff that's happening with this channel in the future, please stick around till the very end of the video. As you know, YouTube is pretty much killing smaller channels like mine at the moment, so things are going to have to change up here. Don't worry, I'm not quitting, but there's just some important changes that are going to happen, so please stick around for those. So back to Boba Fett. Now the first thing I made were the boots. So this is one finished Boba Fett boot. As you may recognize, it is the same boot that I use for my Stormtrooper armors. So what these are is these are really cheap Chelsea boots from a UK shop called Shoe Zone. They've got the right shape to them, they've got the right detail, and these things are actually super comfortable. And obviously if you're not in the UK, any shoe shop you can find that does this kind of shaped boot for cheap also works. You don't have to go getting the expensive ones because you're gonna have to paint it anyway. So the first thing that I did is I took some paint thinner and I went over the whole of the boot just to try and get that sort of shininess off of the leather. If you keep that sort of shiny layer on, the paint is not going to stick as well, so it's just good to give it a quick once over and wipe it down just to make sure there's no more paint thinner left on the shoe. Then I went over the top with some Angelus branded white leather paint. This is paint that I have used for my Stormtrooper boots before. If you're just making Stormtrooper boots, you need about 7 coats of white paint to get a solid colour, but I was just using it as a base for this, so I only did 2. The reason for doing this, obviously because it's a leather paint, it is made to go on shoes like this and it's flexible, so it gives something for the spray paint to adhere to. If you just went over and spray painted the boots, you'll find that these will crack and peel a heck of a lot quicker. I've been wearing these shoes around for a little while just to sort of wear them in a bit and just get used to wearing the suit, and there's a little bit of cracking on there, but honestly that is not a huge amount. Changing colours of boots like this is difficult. You won't get no cracking whatsoever. The only way to do that was if you were to make a shoe out of blue dyed leather. Now there's a couple of extra detail pieces just on the shoe here. I glued these on before doing the paint, and these are actually pieces I'm using for an up and coming costume. It's just bits of elasticated cord. I already had it and it was the right size, so I thought I might as well use that, and it's just hot glued in place. So this colour is the same spray paint that I've used for the helmet. It's mainly 3 different colours for the colour palette of Boba Fett, so you just tend to use a lot of the same paint, so you don't have to spend a lot on loads of different paint cans. But spray paint does not go too well on these parts, which are the elasticated bits of the shoe. These needed to be a different colour anyway, so on here is actually acrylic paint that I just mixed up and painted in these gaps. And the final detail are 2 spikes on the front. Now these would normally be mounted, looking at the reference pictures, on the rubber sole of the shoe, but I knew that they wouldn't really want to stick there if I did that. Now these spikes are the same spikes that I used for my 20-pound Tusken Raider build, which is somewhere up there. They're cheap off eBay, and I just used my Dremel to sort of grind away at the end to make sure they weren't really sharp, because obviously your costumes do get checked when you go to events now. Not always hugely thoroughly, but you're going to be that one unlucky person to get checked, so I just wanted to make sure they were safe and they're not going to do a lot of damage. Well, if I kick someone really hard they will, but I'm going to try not to. And these are actually screw-on, so the idea was to drill a hole through the front toe of the shoe and screw it on at the back, but the actual leather is too thick for the small screw that comes with it to actually go through and screw it on. So I have super glued them in place, but it does mean you do have to be careful, because if you catch the toe of your shoe on the floor, these will snap off. So it's not the greatest way of attaching them, but it works as long as you're mindful of where you're walking. Next we have the armour pieces, and these are just simply made out of EVA foam. Now if you're going for Mandalorian Mercs approval, as far as I know they don't allow EVA foam in their club if you use that as an armour, so you're going to have to use something different like Foamex, or just to get an armour kit from somewhere else. But if you're not looking for club approval, this is an easy and cheap way of doing it. So EVA foam is a really nice, easy material to work with. It's, well, maybe it's not too easy when you start doing it, but the more you practice, kind of the better you get. So the first thing when you're making EVA armour is you want templates. I just used a bit of old newspaper to make the templates, so I just needed a big sheet in order to do stuff for the chest. And for the base of my Fett gauntlets, I used a template that I'd saved from my Templar Knight gauntlets. So if you want to see an easy, simple tutorial on how to make foam gauntlets, go check out my Templar Knight. So once you've worked it all out in paper and you kind of got a vague idea of how it's all going to go together, then you can transfer it to foam. Now, most of the foam that I used for this was 5mm foam, so it's nice and thin, it works well with the heat gun, and it's nice and easy to cut, so you don't have to worry about going over and cleaning up all the edges. Once you've got all the parts cut out, some of them you're going to want to mold into a shape, into a better form. So the best thing to use is a heat gun for that, and that also helps seal the armour, which is something I didn't do for the jetpack and I should have done, so thank you commenters for pointing that out. Do be careful, because if you do have seams in your foam, if you go over it with a heat gun, sometimes that can split the seams, so just put it on a low heat around those areas and then you can heat the rest up and use that to bend. Having massive amounts of detail in this costume is not something you need to worry about, so this is why foam is perfect, especially if you're sort of not quite into working with foam at the moment and want a simpler project to do. So these are obviously the completed gauntlets. My right one mainly consists of a thicker bit of 1cm foam in the middle, and the rest of the detail is just done with 5mm foam just glued on top and on the sides. The left one's slightly different. We've got that 1cm bit of foam in the middle. And on top, this is actually a small cardboard tube off of a roll of bandages that I had. And the cone bit of the end, this is some really thin 2mm craft foam just formed into a cone shape. That was also something you might want to template out just to get the right size for. This piece is the shoulder armour. This is different to normal Boba Fett because Boba Fett has shoulder and back piece kind of all in one, if I recall. Whereas this, you just have plain shoulder armour, and I decided not to have a back piece with this costume because the cape that you make hides it and the jetpack would pretty much cover it anyway. So you can see here a slight example of where the heat gun has split some of the seams slightly. The seam is really nice here, but just on the edges it starts to come away, so you do have to be a bit careful. Hello, sorry, I had to quickly move the camera because the sun has now moved in completely the wrong place and was shining directly into my eyes. So with this shoulder armour, I did it all in one piece, and this covers where I was planning to put the clips on the jumpsuit to hold the jetpack, but as it was covering it, I thought I might as well just attach the clips to it. Now, this is only something I recommend doing if your jetpack is really nice and lightweight, because then it will make this pull back, and because this is going around your neck, it's going to just try and choke you a little bit. I've got Velcro attachments on the bottom which go onto the jumpsuit, but still, you want to be careful. Only do that if you've got a lightweight jetpack. If not, attach it to your jumpsuit. So with this being one piece and an awkward chip, you can't put it on like that. It's just going to stay on top of your head. So you kind of got to do it in the vein which you have to put on your helmet if you're a stormtrooper. You put it on sideways, force it on, and then turn it around. The two most simple pieces of armour on this costume, these are your little shoulder pieces. So they're just both the same size, same 5mm foam, and slightly curved with the heat gun, and they just attach straight on there. And as you can see, this one sports the Imperial Outlanders Crimson Watch, which is our squad just for Mandalorians. Moving down, we've got the chest piece. Now the chest piece was something I was originally going to do in 3 separate parts, but mounting them separately on the chest, they weren't sitting right. Even when I took them off, made them smaller, reheat molded them, put them back on, they kept sort of moving out of position and overlapping too much. So I decided in the end to just put them all as one piece because you don't need that obvious gap in between the armor pieces like you do for a normal Boba Fett, and this works a lot better. So if you can do this all in one sheet, and then you can add a little bit of scoring down in what would be the gaps between the armor just to make it look like it's separate pieces, that's what works really well. Another really simple bit of armor, this is the belt and the codpiece. So you've got the main codpiece shape, this just hangs down, there's no attachments. For this, just so it flexes and moves, unlike Stormtrooper armor where the front is attached to your back armor, because there is no back armor on this. It's just enough that it covers the crotch area of the jumpsuit, because the jumpsuit it does hang a little bit low, but not big enough that it looks weird and out of place. Then underneath has been glued just a long strip of that 5mm EVA foam, enough that it can go around my middle and it's nice and tight so I know it won't go anywhere. And on the top we've got the 1cm foam. I've cut out all the little rectangles just so they're the same size and there's same spacing between all of them. Again, another nice simple piece. These are the knee pads. Just the same 5mm EVA foam with two little rectangles of 5mm foam again, just for a little bit of detail. And on the back, there's just been hot glued some elastic so it's tight enough that it holds them in place on my knee, and then it also makes that really nice shape where the leg of the jumpsuit sort of comes in and goes back out again that you see on most Boba Fett cosplayers. And these are the final parts of the main set of armor for Boba Fett. So when you're making foam like this, you can use hot glue or you can use a contact adhesive to stick the foam together. The contact adhesive is the best stuff, and the best contact adhesive you can get is barge cement. So if you can get that, use that. But if you've only got hot glue, less is more, and it's just going to help with neatening up the seams. So now you've got them all molded and glued together, you got to get them ready for paint. So as I said, you're going to want to heat seal the parts of your costume before you paint it, and just be careful of the seams. So just go over it with the heat gun and make sure it's got that nice shiny surface to it now. And now I'll try something new. For the jetpack, I went and used the Polyprop Seal Prime to sort of seal the foam. It came out alright, but it wasn't great, so for this I decided to try and use Plastidip. Plastidip is a sort of spray-on rubber that also helps seal the foam and is a good base for starting to paint on. It's flexible, so it works really well with foam, and you can find it cheap online. You can find it on eBay for about £10, I think. You will need to do a couple of coats on the foam, so probably the maximum amount you want to do is 3. Just nice even coats and leave it to dry for about half an hour, 20 minutes in between each coat. Once that's dry, it's ready to paint, and I just used spray paint so I knew all my colours would match on the armour. So for the gauntlets, it's the same colour as the main colour of the helmet and the boots. It's a really nice light blue. For the main shoulder armour, the belt and the shoulder plates, these are done in a slate blue, which is what I use for the cheekbone sections of the helmet. And for the knee pads and the chest plate, I used the colour called Straw Flower, which is the same colour that I've used for my jetpack. Now if you just want to leave it as its normal sprayed colour, that's absolutely fine. But again, to me, I don't like it as just the plain colour. It looks really, really flat. So I just decided to add a little bit more just using acrylic paints. You don't have to go totally overboard and do a lot of weathering just to make it look worn. The jetpack, it worked because that's something that would get more dirty over time, but for the armour, I wanted it to stay a bit cleaner. So the best example is on the chest plate here. We've got a little bit of weathering, some of the top where you've got one of the grooves, and just a little bit in the corners. But to make it look like it's walked out of the animation, all around the edges I gave it a black trim, and with the gaps in the middle between the armour pieces I've also given it that black line. Also just subtly around the edges gone over with a bit of yellow acrylic just to make it look a little bit darker. It just kind of gives it a little bit more depth because it's not just something that's going to be seen on camera, it's going to be something people are going to see in person. So I just wanted it to look a little bit more like it's had some more care and attention put into it, as it were. The same method was used on the knee plate. You've got that black trim all around the edge of the main knee plate as well as the detail pieces, and you've got that little bit of sort of yellow tint just around the edge of all those as well. So the little shoulder plates are the only other pieces of armour that have got the black trim. I did start doing it for the bigger armour pieces, but I just didn't like how it looked, so I thought just for the chest, the shoulders and the knees, I'm gonna have that nice trim on there, and it's got a tiny little bit of black just around the edges. The belt also just has a little bit of black just in the gaps. Again, not something that's sort of too in your face in terms of weathering. And on the front, just in the corners, we've got a little bit too. For the main bit of shoulder armour, I decided just to have weathering mostly on the back because that's where the jetpack would be, and there's very subtle amounts of it on the front, but I wanted the front to be mostly clean. The gauntlets sort of have the heaviest amount of sort of added paint on there. So what I did was I mixed up a really dark blue and I put it in sort of all the grooves and put it over most of the body of the gauntlet. And I let that dry for a bit before getting a really stiff brush and with water just sort of rubbing away at it, and that way you get sort of all these really nice sort of lines in there. It makes it look like there's been some kind of paint that's either worn away or dirt that hasn't quite been able to get out of all the grooves. Again, it's not something that's too in your face, but for these I think it works really nicely. And also just added colours on the buttons on the gauntlet this side, and I've also put my own little Easter egg on this side with Ace written in Orabesh. And some of the raised detail parts do have that little black trim as well. Now the armour is made, you actually need something to stick it to. So this is the jumpsuit that I got to use for the base of the Boba Fett. This is actually just a workman's boiler suit. This is a Dickies brand boiler suit that I just got off eBay. I think it cost about £15. You don't need the flight suit that Boba Fett cosplayers use because you don't need all the pockets, you just need a simple white jumpsuit. So there were a few modifications that needed to be done. This did come with a lot of outside pockets that would have got in the way of where the armour would have been placed. So those had to be removed using a seam ripper. The sleeves were way too long for me, so they had to be taken in. So I just folded the sleeve up inside itself, sewed around the bottom part and the top part just to stop it coming back out. The nice thing about this jumpsuit, it does have pockets, so if I need to use pockets in this costume I can, but it actually has two. It has one which is sort of internal pockets that have actually got lining, and one which is actually essentially just a split in the suit, so if you're wearing something with pockets underneath, you can get to it. Obviously, I won't be wearing anything with pockets underneath, so that's something that had to be stitched up so you don't see my lovely Star Wars branded underwear. I found the legs on this were also quite long for me, but you do need that extra leg length, so I would recommend not sewing those up straight away. Now, the one other modification that I decided to do was, well, the good thing about this, it's got a collar, and Boba Fett does have a high collar on his jumpsuit, so instead of having this roll down or cutting it off, you can use it. So the problem is the poppers only go up to here. So I just got a simple bit of Velcro that just helps attach it to the top. Now the other problem is, before modifying, if you were to put it together, you would have a gap in the middle because of the way that this neck bit has been sewn. So you can see this is the original edge of the neck bit, and here, this is actually an offcut of one of the pockets that I took off. So it's the same material, same color, and I've sewn it onto the inside of this and attached a little bit of Velcro on here. So now I can pull the other side over, do up the Velcro, and there you've got your own little neck ring. Now there is one more problem that I found with this, which is every time I looked down, the fabric would just bunch up and it would stay down. So the way around this that I thought is I had a little bit of boning, which is essentially a flexible plastic that you can sew onto stuff. It's used for like making corsets. So that piece of flexible boning is here, and I've just sewn it into the front. So this bit is nice and rigid, so if I move my head down, it doesn't bunch up and stay down there. It wants to stay in this position. If you don't have anything like boning, maybe just a little bit of plastic, if you can glue it in there, obviously be careful, make sure it's not sharp, or like a tough strip of cardboard, something like that, but you want something that's strong and just going to keep its shape. And you can see on the rest of me, I've got a menagerie of different colours of Velcro because I ran out of white halfway through. Otherwise this would all be white and this would look a bit more professional, but hey, at least I've kept it symmetrical. So up top here I've got 4 bits of Velcro, 2 on the shoulders and 2 which are split because that's where the seam is, and this is for the front of the shoulder armour. And on the back I also have 1 bit of Velcro in the middle because I found having it on the top of the shoulders, every time I moved they would just come apart. So every time I move my shoulders, all you'd hear is a Velcro ripping. I would recommend sewing this on, not gluing, because if you want to machine wash this, if you hot glue or something like that on there, it's most likely going to come off on a hot wash. For the shoulder plates, there's just 2 little strips of Velcro in there and 2 strips on my arm, so really nice and simple. Just line up the top and bottom and it sits on there and doesn't want to come off. Now it looks like there's a lot of Velcro sort of going on in the chest area. That's because, as I said, these pieces were separate pieces before, so all of them were attached separately. Obviously now it's all one piece, so you probably don't need as much Velcro as this, but as it was already glued on, I thought I might as well keep the Velcro strips on there, so you just line everything up and this stays on really nice as well. It's the beauty of having foam armour, is it's really light and it doesn't pull at your clothing too much, because obviously this does sit kind of loose here. If you've got something that's too heavy, it's going to pull out and it's going to be a bit awkward. The only other bit of Velcro I've got is a little bit on the bottom here, and this is actually for the very bottom of the jetpack, so if I have to run somewhere, then the jetpack's not going to fly up and hit anybody or just come back and hit me. It just helps keep it in place a little bit more and stops it wiggling. Even though the straps, because they're fairly tight, it doesn't move around too much, but again, that's just to stop it moving in case it does want to. So to hold in the bottom of the trousers inside the boot, because you're going to need that extra leg length to make sure they're down inside the boot and not pop out, just make some simple elastic straps. Just got a bit of white elastic, stitch them together on one side, and it's tight enough that it fits well to my ankle, but not tight enough that it cuts off the circulation, because you kind of don't want that when you're trooping. And the one other sort of cloth bit of the costume that you need to get are gloves. These are just really cheap sort of what's classed as military or waiter's gloves. So these are just a nice white cotton. They've got a little bit of sort of detailing in the middle. And my gauntlets sit low enough on the hands that you don't have to have them too long on the wrists. You might notice for some, if I move, like it's gonna pop out. If that does bother you, you can always stitch on a little bit of something extra. But for me, it's not too bad. So you've built your armor. It's now on the jumpsuit. The jumpsuit's nice and comfortable. Now you're just missing the accessories. So the first one I'm gonna start off with is this, which is a Boba Fett's little shoulder cape. I'd like to thank my friend Ben for helping me out with this, because he has made a Boba Fett cape and I wasn't sure what shape or like how it was attached to the back of Boba Fett or what size really to do it. So he just sent me pictures of his cape and said, just do that. So I just did that. As you can see, this is a fairly thin fabric. This is just cheap fabric I got from my local fabric store. The colour of Boba Fett's cape in the animated special does seem to change depending on what reference pictures I was looking at. Some of them it's black, some of them it's brown, some of them it's more of a burgundy. So I just decided to go for just a nice simple brown and have a nice orange trim on the bottom. Just so it doesn't look too neat, I decided to leave the edges nice and rough. So all I did was just cut it and then ripped it the rest of the way, just so you've got all these little loose seams at the top. So Boba Fett's cape is meant to be pretty much a perfect square, so this one was done approximately 75 centimeters by 75. I did rip a little bit more off than intended on some areas, so it's probably a tad wonkier. Obviously you've got to account for adding that extra bit of orange on the bottom, so you don't want to cut your brown into a perfect square. So I got my two colours cut out and I just needed to put them together. Now you could sit there and sew it all by hand if you wanted to. If you've got a sewing machine, you can go and just use the sewing machine to go through there. You can make a nice neat line. But I just bought some fabric glue for a future project and I thought this would be a perfect excuse to test it out. So I didn't want this seam here to be really messy, so I folded it over so we've got a nice rounded edge, and just used the fabric glue to attach the brown to the orange, and this stuff is really nice and strong. Do note that on lighter colours you will see a little bit of it poking through, but as I've got a little bit of sort of weathering on here, that's not too big a deal. We're not here for perfect, we're here for badass, and I don't know, capes just kind of scream that, don't they? So the cape is nice and simply attached using a Velcro strip that goes from one corner of the cape, so either one of the top corners, and just connects to a strip on the other side, just like that. So it hangs down. That looks pretty cool. And on the top we got a couple of squares of EVA foam to sort of make it look like it's been bolted on, similar to Boba Fett's actual cape. It's light enough, you don't have to worry about it pulling and making ripping sounds with the Velcro. Also on this piece you would have noticed this, which is supposed to be a Wookiee pelt for Boba Fett, but this is a bit of hair from an old wig that I've had sitting around for years. I bought it when I first got my hair cut like this because I was cosplaying Ace at the time, who is the 7th Doctor's companion, so I was going to have it in a plait so it could look like I've got long hair. Also, for the YouTube commenters who asked me why I decided to get my hair cut this short and why I'm not going back to long hair, this is why. I look terrible, but it does mean with a wig I can do this. I would say it's fairly simple for the wig, but it's quite messy, so do be careful when you're cutting a wig. So I just got a big chunk of the hair, used elastic bands on the top and the bottom to hold it in place, cut it off the wig and plaited it. See, at the bottom it's just a small tight red rubber band holding it in place, and at the top I just used hot glue to hot glue as much of the hair together as possible and glued over a little strip of foam just to sort of cover where it's glued on, and just to try and make sure it's not going to completely come out. Now, Boba Fett's one is actually a really sort of long one that goes up and over the shoulder and down the other side, but I didn't have a long enough wig for that, so I thought I would just attach it to here, and it doesn't really look too bad. I've done it right on the end so it doesn't go over the chest armour too much. And we've got one more thing to go, which is a extra holster and another gun. So this is the holster for Boba Fett's pistol. Now, in the reference images that I saw, it looks like a bright orange, and I thought I'd just mute it down a little bit and go for a brown. That, and I already had these really nice leather straps. I thought it's just nice and simple to use. I've had these hanging around for ages, and it's the perfect excuse. Obviously that makes it look more complex than the other armour, but this clip you don't really see because it's going around behind. So the middle part of this holster is made out of foam, same as the rest of it. It's got a specific shape to fit the blaster. Made a template to make sure it's gonna fit around the gun that I'm using. Used a heat gun to mold it into the shape, glued all the pieces together, primed it with plaster dip, and then spray painted it. I've also gone over it slightly with a little bit of orange, which you can't quite see on camera, but just sort of brightened it up a little bit more. So as you can tell, the straps aren't connected exactly on both sides. They're not symmetrical. So it sits at a particular angle rather than sitting outward, because it's meant to be so the blaster actually faces forward. Obviously it's loose on me here because it's meant to go over the other belt armour of the costume, but with the straps you can make it as loose or as tight as you want. Now for the actual blaster to go in this. I like toys that go pew pew. You can use the same method that I did in the first episode of this build, where I made a rifle completely out of foam, so just stuck lots of layers of foam together and sculpted it to create the shape. But I've had these two guys lying around for years. Some of the people that have been around on the channel for a while may have noticed them hiding in the background of the very messy workshop. These are just the toy Jagger Pit Blasters that came with the cheapy kids costume back when Attack of the Clones was out. You can see this is kind of what it looked like before, minus the black paint. The black paint is actually on here because before I ever got a set of armour, I had these Halloween costumes, and I wanted to make an E11 blaster that actually made noises, but I didn't have the E11 toy. So what I did was I got a load of cardboard and I stuck it on top of this gun to make the correct shape for an E11 blaster, so I had a gun that would make noise. And obviously I painted it with acrylic paint, and so that's why there's still black acrylic on here. There's a little bit of Ace cosplay history for you. My very early days, considering I've had my armour since I was like 13, that's very early days. So this was given a quick sand down with some very fine sandpaper, and went over it with a primer just to make sure everything was one nice even colour. Then I was trying to think how to give it a sort of a little bit more definition, so I actually sprayed it with the same blue that I've used for the boots and for the gauntlets, and then I kind of dusted over that with a silver. So if you look close, you can still kind of see the blue coming through. It's not just one solid silver. And then over the top it's been given a wash of black acrylic just to get in all the grooves and make it look a little bit worn and a little bit more sort of gunmetal-y. So it's not accurate to what is in the holiday special, but I thought Boba would probably still have his father's blaster pistols around. It's still a cool little blaster that makes some noise, so that just stays in my holster. And the holster is tight enough around the gun that it doesn't come out. So that's it for the full Star Wars Holiday Special Boba Fett. Now I'm just going to show you some of the shots with the armour fully complete and looking badass, and then remember, come join me after that because I got some news about the channel. But if you're not going to join me for that, I'll hopefully see you in the next video, and as always, may the Force be with you. People that have stuck to the end. Yes, this is some important stuff, but I didn't want to say it at the beginning because I thought people aren't going to watch because it's going to take me a little while to get through this. So, as I mentioned, YouTube is kind of killing smaller channels at the moment. YouTube is something that is part of my living. I have a day job, but I have this as well, and for a while this has been pretty decent. Unfortunately, the last couple of months, YouTube's revenue has gone from decent to pretty much nothing in the space of a few months, and that's not good. So, like many on the YouTube space, I have now moved over to Patreon, so I'm on there now. I think I've set everything up correctly. We're gonna find out now I've made this public. I've got a few different tiers, so if you want to support me on there, you can. It's not something you have to do. You're gonna get a few extra bits on there if you do, but obviously I'm still gonna be making stuff. I'm still gonna run ads on the YouTube, try and get what I can from here. If you are on Patreon, you will get access to things like extra videos I do behind the scenes. Because it does take a while to do these builds, and you guys normally only see stuff when it's complete. So if you're on there, I'll show you guys progress so you get to see what's happening when it's happening. Any extra videos that I do that I think will be decent to put up there that probably won't fit on the channel, maybe anything that's like really small, and maybe a couple of blooper reels if I happen to be really funny at some point. So yes, Patreon! If you want to become a patron, please do. If you don't worry about it. As long as you're watching, that's still helping. Unfortunately, YouTube is really not doing well for us small creators. I've had a comment where someone was saying, oh, it's really nice to see you back. And I replied saying, I've been uploading every week, I haven't left. So when your subscribers can't even find you, the views have been going down, it's hard. But I know I'm not the only one in this boat, so I understand a lot of people do Patreon, quite a few. So if it's something you can't do, then don't agonise about it, but if you can, it will be absolutely wonderful. So thank you if you do. Also, one more thing, as this is happening, I am also doing some more stuff for myself at the moment. So normally I would aim for getting a video up once a week. As you guys probably noticed, I've missed a couple of weeks. Just starting to get into a new routine. Sort of working on myself personally. I've joined a gym, I'm changing my sleeping habits, I'm changing my eating habits, I'm just trying to find somewhere that I feel comfortable with myself. I'm not going to get too much into it, but that means at the moment I'm going to probably think of doing a video once every 2 weeks rather than once a week, because it means my time is going down a little bit for what I'd normally have to do builds, and I don't want to rush builds because at the moment I find trying to push myself to get a build done every week means sometimes they're not coming out as good as they should. So obviously with Boba Fett I've taken a little bit of extra time, hence the no videos out recently. But if I do have like a couple of small builds I do in a row, then I'll upload them when they're ready. But so it's probably going to be a video every 2 weeks rather than every one. But if you do miss me in that time, do follow me on my social media. I'm probably most active on Instagram at the moment. And so you'll get little pictures here and there of stuff. Obviously I'm going to save a lot behind the scenes for the Patreon, but you will get some pictures on there of certain builds that I do and anything else that I'm up to in between that. Sometimes I do live stream on my Facebook page, which is Cosplay and Artwork, so you can go over there. And also on occasions I do snark about things on Twitter, so if that's your thing you can come follow me on there too. But thank you for sticking around and supporting the channel for as long as you have. Hopefully, the goal is this year to try and hit 100,000 subscribers. So any videos you find interesting that you like, please do share it with your friends. I do greatly appreciate it. And if there are particular things you'd like to see more of in the future, do let me know. I'm always open to suggestions, it just depends on whether I think I can actually make that particular suggestion or not. So thank you again, and I'll see you next time. Bye!